Welcome back to Inside Out Redemption as we conclude our three-part series, Similarities of Returning Vets and Formerly Incarcerated People. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Also, drop a comment and let us know what you think.
Based on homelessness, based on drug addiction, based on other titles that we got reenter society, how does that influence the stories people tell themselves about the reentering formerly incarcerated person and or military person, which supports, again, the top of the triangle of violence directed towards that person. He's homeless. He's a drug addict. She's a this, he's a that. He has TBI. So therefore, and they act like this. Therefore, the violence demonstrated to them, namely the deprivation and maldevelopment piece, is now directed towards that community.
Yeah. When we're talking about mental health here, mental health doesn't discriminate. It doesn't discriminate for people who've been in prison, people who've been in the military. It doesn't discriminate whether you're a teacher, you're a police officer. Mental health is out there. That's and right. A lot of times people face a lot of the same issues: depression, anxiety, PTSD, different traumas that have been experienced over time. We're talking about veterans and prisoners, formerly incarcerated people here. The veteran is combat experiences, it's the structure, it's the systems that they're involved with. And for those who have been incarcerated, there's a trauma of incarcerated, the stigmas that are associated with it. And so as we start talking about stigmas, we can't forget, we talked about isolation within being inside. There's also an isolation once you transition. For the veteran, there's a misunderstanding that a lot of people have. There's this disconnect from the civilians who are always saying, thank you for your service. And the service person who's saying, man, my military experience, yeah, I did this, but you're thanking me for a service, but at the same time, it harmed me, it hurt me. And for the formerly incarcerated person, it's the judgment, it's the criminal past. It's feeling like you're socially isolated. I remember getting out of prison and thinking to myself that everybody knew I was in prison. And everyone I interacted with, I just felt like there was this big old stamp on my forehead that said formerly incarcerated. So I had this insecurity. I felt like I couldn't really open up with people because every time I did, I was judged. I was looked at a certain kind of way. And there's people I probably should never have shared my past before they got to know me anyways. But there are different isolations and stigmas that go along with that. And so when we think about how that leads to homelessness and housing instability, well, a formerly incarcerated person has a lack of income, a lack of support. There's housing discrimination. And so there's this isolation and insecurity that comes along with that. There's mental health challenges that can be triggered because of that. With the veterans, it may not be financial instability, but it could be. But a lot of it has to do with their inability to understand how to live a life where no one is making decisions for them or guiding them. And so when we start narrowing this down, it's identity and purpose. Both of them had an identity and a purpose for so many years in the way they lived. And now they lost that identity. They lost that purpose, which also can affect their mental health, affect their self-worth, affect how they reintegrate into society.
I tell you, Thomas, well put. I tell you, one of the themes when I gave my keynote address was we got to stop giving simple answers to complex problems. Why don't hey, if he's homeless, get him a place to live. But there's so many other variables that we're not taking into account. And that's the beauty of community-based participatory research, which we'll talk about later. But there's so many other just issues that affects a homeless, one that's homeless, or one that has mental health issues, or one who have addiction issues, or whatever, or where do I start? Well, start from here and go. Well, it's not that simple.
Not that simple.
It's not that simple. So we have to facilitate the community of interest that consists of diverse and inclusive a diverse and inclusive group that have many representatives from that community, that we just don't, as the social scientists, we just don't hear them, but we're listening to them. We just don't see them, but we observe them. We just don't allow them in, but we include them. And that's critical to addressing, not necessarily solving, but addressing the problem in a more complete manner than just saying, just give them a job, just give them drugs, just give them this, just give them that. That's it. That may in fact exacerbate, make the problem worse than it was. And I know you are a community based participatory research fan. So I'm just giving you red meat now. I know you chomping at the bit to go after that.
Yeah, when we think about CBPR, community-based participatory research, and I don't like saying that too many times, but for a lot of the work that I do, it's based in the community. It's based on participation from those that we're serving. And I
That's right.
think a lot of times what we do is in our mind, we think that this is going to work. This outcome or this program that I have is going to work. I remember sitting in a program while I was in prison. It was a 10-month program every single day, 5 days a week, and for 10 months. And I was sitting in this program, and the guy who was facilitating this program and the doctor who was over the program, neither one of them looked like me, came from where I come from, try to even understand where I come from. What they wanted to teach me was the very things that work for them. But in this instance, in my mind, I was like, you don't understand where I come from. You don't know anything about me. You're not even coming from the standpoint of acknowledging my experience as being real. You just think that criminality is a just a total mindset. It has nothing to do with trauma. It has nothing to do with the decisions that I've been exposed to from other people. It has none of this. And so when we start thinking about how we're going to engage successfully helping people transition, I don't care what side of the fence you stand on when it comes to people who are formerly incarcerated. They will be your neighbors one day. What kind
That's
of
right.
neighbor do you want? I
That's
don't
right.
care where you stand on our military veterans and the type of service and what you think they should have and the way they should be. They're going to be your neighbors one day. So if we want neighbors that are good neighbors, neighbors that are contributing to society in a more healthier way, we have to care about both sides. The best way to care for both sides is to listen to both sides, to sit down with people who have this experience and understand their stories. Because one of the things I've learned is regardless of everything that I've done in my past, once you hear my story, I have more people who gravitate toward goodness than negativity because they begin to understand the depth of what caused me to make decisions that I made.
Right.
Doesn't justify the decisions I made. I'm not talking about justice. I'm not saying, look, let's just gloss over this part and move to this next phase of my life. No, what I'm saying is we all have to understand we fit in this same boat. And so for me to be able to understand another side of other people, I need to be able to listen to them. So for the last 12 years, I've been working with Morehouse School of Medicine's Prevention Research Center's Community Coalition Board. And the main tool that we use for this community coalition is CBPR. And to understand it, so in 2017, I was fortunate enough to be accepted to Michigan University's CBPR Academy. And it was a 1-year academy that allowed me to really understand that even those who are in academia also have a perspective that needs to be honored and listened to. And
Right.
so a lot of times what we don't do is we don't listen. And I think CBPR is one of those great tools that if we can set it up correctly, empower everybody who's a part of it, it allows us to listen to one another and hear truth from both sides and not just look at problems, but really seek out solutions. And so as we're talking through this phase of what's the similarities between a person who's incarcerated and a veteran or a person who's enlisted into the military, we have to really begin to listen to these groups of people so we can see what type of struggles they are faced with and how we can really support them and help them through it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Hearing versus listening, listening versus hearing. We hear everything, but we listen to some things. And listening is very deliberate. It's very deliberate. It's very intentional. But listening is also painful. And is, because everybody wants to talk. Everybody has the right idea, but listening to the community in which we serve, the individuals in which the communities in which we serve is very important. And to illuminate just the challenges that not only the returning veteran, but one and the same, the returning veteran that found themselves incarcerated, and it challenges that person experience reentering society. I utilized my capstone paper that I wrote for Morehouse School of Medicine, and I focused on Black women who are combat veterans who were just as involved in the challenges they experienced reentering into society.
Mm.
And that one person is not considered. And I'm going to talk about that person for a minute. That person is Sarah. Let's name her Sarah Y for now. And Sarah Y, as a child, probably experienced adverse childhood experience, i.e., sexual trauma, physical trauma, psychological trauma, physical trauma. Had an identity issue as far as being a Black young woman, so intersectional issues. In her way out, so that's one person. And in her way out, she's seen Sergeant Green and Sergeant Brown, female Sergeant Green and Sergeant Brown. So she wanted to change her identity and become a military and be all she could be, only to face in this environment bigotry, racism, in some cases, MST, military sexual trauma, and other isolation, and in a sense of invisibility. So that's two people in one person. Then this person, Sergeant Y, she goes to combat and she experiences the horror of combat, of isolation, all those things that she experienced in the peacetime military. Now she's in combat, wartime, and she's seen and experienced life and death. But then she reenters society, and unfortunately, a lot of Sergeant Y's didn't retire as a sergeant's major, the highest level of a sergeant, or Colonel Y. She probably retired as maybe Specialist Y, E4 or E5, so she returned to the same environment. And maybe that environment that she returned to was a VUCA environment. Is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Therefore, she probably did something that got her incarcerated. So that's the fourth person now. And she experiences the horrors of prison. Now she's released, and then formerly incarcerated Sergeant Y is now reentering society with all of this, with all this on her. Those are 5 individuals in one person. So how do we as a community treat that? How do we acknowledge that? What do we do to facilitate Sergeant Miss Y to be whole and reenter society in a compassionate manner? How do we do that? Through CBC, community-based participatory research. I hate participatory as well.
Yeah,
Participatory,
participatory. So
through things like that. Go ahead, bro.
I want to share, like, I was criminal minded. You look at me right now, you would never know that I had the criminal mind that I had. I was criminally minded. Everything I thought about, the way to be successful in life was through crime. It was my ticket because I couldn't see anything else. My hope was in something else, but my actions and my mentality was wrapped around criminal mindedness. And so when I think about that, what helped me transform? First, it was my faith, first of all, first and foremost. But even though I still had a belief in God and had faith in God and was living to change my life for God, I still had this criminal mind. How do you overcome this? How do you position yourself to really begin to see other people and what the value they bring to life? And in 1997, I heard someone quote this quote: "Try to understand rather than be understood." Try to understand rather than be understood. And I wrote it down on this very piece of paper right here. This paper was written on 1997.
Wow.
It's the same piece of paper that I wrote it down on. Try to understand rather than be understood. And I keep this paper with me because it's a constant reminder of how we are to really overcome a lot of these barriers, help this person who's been in this VUCA situation to
Mm,
really begin to get the teaching and the training and the treatment and everything else that they need, the healthcare, the assistance, and whatever it may be. Not just saying, hey, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and do something different. The reality is, some people don't even notice that there are boots out there. Some people don't understand that, there's a way of moving in life that can be different. And for me, I didn't think there was anything that I could do that was different, because my defense would always say, uh, well, my excuse would always say, you don't know me, you don't know where I'm from, you don't know what I've been through. And then for everybody who has an excuse, they make a defense right after that to
that's
defend
right.
that excuse.
That's right.
And so if you're never really trying to understand them, they'll never drop their defenses to let you into their world. And
Wow.
it's unfortunate that we're missing so many valuable people because we don't allow them into a space where we want to actually understand what they're going through. And
Mm,
for me, I was very fortunate to go through a good process that God put me in. It helped me overcome a lot of things, but for the most part, it wasn't other people trying to understand me. It was my ability to stop and understand them
right.
and what they're going through, and speak to them in a way now that you can understand me. So a lot of times we have to pause and really take time to listen to people, to understand the challenges, and really begin to put solutions in place that are directly uh, effective for that person, that individual, and not in general, where we think generalities: if I can just get you a job, you'll be fine. No, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Now you know what, Thomas, there's some pros and cons. There's more cons
Absolutely.
in our belief. And I believe, and I can speak, and I'm gonna take a bold step out there and say I'm gonna speak for us. I'm saying there's more pros than cons. Some people might, a financial person say no, there's more cons than pros. When tailoring particular approach to meet the needs of particular people or communities is important to facilitate a thriving environment. Tonight, we looked at structures. First, we looked at the similarities between the formerly incarcerated and returning veterans and their challenges or similarities that they demonstrate reentering society. And we look at it from a very high level, from the structural piece, and we came down to the individual piece. And usually in that structural individual piece, well, maybe it's a structural piece, is a very transactional relationship. You do this and that'll happen. You do that and this will happen. But then, we looked at those two, the institutional, the individual, looked at the reentry piece, and a platform to facilitate a more transformative piece. As Thomas's organization and my organization or a Bridge to Light is focused on the transformation, the disruption, the transformation of systems, structures, and persons and relationships to enable a new reality. And that's what community-based participatory research is focused on, is how we including, how we seeing, how we listening, how we understand the community in which we serve and include them in the transformation process, opposed to everybody's from Brown University, from Harvard, from these Ivy League schools. They already have the answer because they did the research, opposed to the man and woman who live in those environments, and they tell you what's most feasible and what can enable their human needs and so forth. So tonight's show, Thomas, was very, very impactful. And I encourage not only just our common viewers, but junior colleges, postgraduate um, of institutions and so forth. Take a listen. Take a listen. I think we all could pull some nuggets of wisdom out of this podcast in particular, to further explore transformation when it comes to marginalized or underserved communities.
And I think, we started our relationship through the Magic program, as you said early on in the show, um, Masters of Administration and Justice Involved Care. And I think that when we start thinking about the care for the justice impacted, we also have to think about the care for our veterans. We can still look at the same information and find that veterans and former prisoners have different backgrounds of where they served at, but their experiences highlight common societal, psychological, and economic challenges that need targeted support and understanding to aid successful time within and through reintegration. And so I think we need to allow people need to understand you have the ability now to take some of the education that you get or the experience you get and apply it to these two different groups and create systems and structures that can overlap with both of them in supporting them with the needs and the targeted support that they need. So I just think that this podcast in general should spark a lot of people to think different ways about how they can support and help people through their transitions and while they're serving in different ways.
Yes, yes. So with that, we're going to close this evening. I think we gave you enough. I think we gave you enough to think about, to talk about, to engage, to like, share, subscribe, engage, and challenge us. Challenge us, ask us questions, because there's no other podcast that I know of. I'm sure there are many of them, but I don't know of them that share this unique community with Thomas Cotton and I, and we're speaking about a topic that is very unique, and that's the challenges those who are reentering society face, the obstacles and so forth. But with that, at a British Light, we believe everyone and everything is a resource. It takes a network of progression to defeat networks of oppression. So let's make the net work.
And in Redemption and Advancement Alliance, we believe that as long as a person has a heartbeat, there's an opportunity for redemption. So let us not give up on anybody, because we understand that redemption is available to us all.
Have a good night, everybody, and thank you so very much for witnessing, for looking, for being with us tonight. Thank you very much. Good night.